The Ahsoka show continues to prove why Dave Filoni should have been in charge of this from the very beginning. Halfway through this episode, I'm telling myself, this right here should have been the sequel trilogy. These ideas, these concepts, even some of these characters should have been the damn sequel trilogy. Let's talk about Ahsoka, episode number 6. This episode was like a whole movie crammed into an episode. It was about 40-ish minutes long, but it felt like 2 hours because a lot happened. A lot of the speculation about who was going to show up where and what was going to happen, when we're going to see this character, that character. A lot of it was closed, as now we're preparing to go into the final 2 episodes of the show. And man, things look so bright under Filoni, dude. So the majority of this episode, in fact, almost all of it, had very little Ahsoka anyway. She's in the whale, traveling in the whale, going to the other galaxy. The majority of this episode followed Sabine. And not just Sabine, but also the entire group of bad guys. The villains end up leaving hyperspace and they go to a planet called Peridea, which is a planet of the Dathomiri. Now, there's a whole lot of lore there. Obviously, the Night Sisters of Dathomir, like, there's a whole... It's linked. It's all linked. And basically, they kind of go through some of the lore about how there were people there that existed, many, many, many years ago. Her people, Morgan's people, they used creatures to travel through galaxies. So they land on this planet and they go to this like Stonehenge type area, and there's other Night Sister witches there, and they're called the Great Mothers. And basically, the Great Mothers were the ones that were calling to Morgan in that dream. Now, these are very powerful dark magicians. This is like the dark side of the Force, the deeper part of the dark side of the Force, the incantation side. It's not just about firing lightning and saying cool things, being angry. There's a lot more to the dark side, and this was explored in Clone Wars and Rebels. Both of those shows explored this a little bit. Now we're actually getting in live action for a whole new audience to understand. So they're waiting for Thrawn, and they said Thrawn is coming. So I'm thinking to myself, well, we'll see Thrawn the next episode. That's not really what happens. So Sabine is there, and Sabine's presence bothers the Great Mothers, so they want to keep her away. And Balin has this conversation. He's very interesting in this episode where he discusses with Shin that the place they're in was like a legend from the Jedi Temple childhood. This legendary place from another galaxy where like a lot of the origins of this galaxy took place. Like, I don't know if this is going to tie into the James Mangold teased movie, if it actually has to do with like the first Jedi, the first one to discover the Force, or even the origins of the known galaxy in Star Wars. But good stuff here. I love the scene from Balin. He seems almost frustrated about how repetitive things are. He said that he realized when the Jedi died and the Empire came up that it's just one thing after another. It keeps happening, which is the same thing, if you remember, going back to Force Awakens, it's the same thing that Maz Kanata said. Remember, the evil has many shapes, the Sith, the Empire, now the First Order. It's all from the same source. However, the ideas here with the Great Mothers and the dark side magic and all that stuff, that to me, that should have been the premise for the villains of the sequel trilogy. They should have never brought back Palpatine, maybe not even done like a Snoke Kylo Ren thing, even though that had promise at first. Something to where the villains are totally different. They know the dark side, but they know different aspects of the dark side that even the Emperor didn't know. That would have made a really, really interesting villain for the sequel trilogy. Instead, we have it here. So what happens is there's a scene where it's almost implied that Sabine opens up a door with the Force or uses the Force. So I don't know, maybe her powers are better used in that galaxy. Well, anyways, a giant Star Destroyer shows up, and I'm like, oh boy, it's Thrawn. So Thrawn shows up with night troopers, and Thrawn walks right between them. So we're actually seeing Thrawn for the first time. Now, I want to say about this portrayal of Thrawn, it was similar to the one from Rebels, but not quite the same thing. I thought that even though it's the same actor, right, it's still Lars Mikkelsen portraying Thrawn. His voice is slightly different. He does it a bit, he's not as slow as he was in Rebels, but he basically is still doing the thing where he has his hands behind his back most of the time, and he's very cunning and all that, you know. And again, it would have been cool if the villains of the sequel trilogy, which is what it was for, you know, the Heir to the Empire novels, would have been Thrawn with like the Night Sisters or whatever, like something where you have Thrawn as like the military enemy, the enemy of Leia and Han, and then Luke's enemy could have been a dark side user, maybe not necessarily Thrawn himself, but somebody like a Balin. I'm not saying that it would have been the same character. I'm saying a similar character for what the sequel trilogy could have been would have been awesome. So what ends up happening is Balin meets Thrawn for the first time, and we're introduced to Enoch as the captain of the Night Troopers. Thrawn recognizes Sabine from Rebels, and he brings up that Ezra might be dead and that she gambled the entire galaxy on Ezra. So what he decides to do, he decides to let her go find Ezra. So she's given weapons and warned about nomads. But like always with Thrawn, he's got like a secret, you know, a secret plot. So the idea is Thrawn tells Balin to follow Sabine, and that he's basically ordered that when she finds Ezra, to kill them both. So it's all being done. He's going to let her go do the hard work and find Ezra, because Ezra's not with Thrawn. All those theories about Ezra being captured with Thrawn, that's not what happened. So he's not with him. But Thrawn recognizes that Ezra could be a problem, so Balin's put in charge of taking him out. And I love how this episode, I don't remember seeing any of it in trailers. They really kept this a secret. So she fights these nomads, the ones she was warned about. This is an awesome fight scene. Like, she ignites the lightsaber and just goes to town on them. So we have a very Return of the Jedi type of scene. Remember the scene in Return of the Jedi with Leia where she first meets Wicket? Sabine meets this little crab thing under a rock. Let's just call them E-Rocks for now. I don't know if they said the name of them, but it's these creatures that inhabit that planet. But this is so much like Leia in Return of the Jedi, dude. I mean, it's so similar. It's like they took the scene right out of it. So this creature, this E-Rock, might know Ezra, and there's a bunch of them around. So now we have an interesting situation or interesting conversation again with Balin, where, you know, Shin asks him about Ezra, but Ezra's too young to have been in the Jedi Order, the original Jedi Order. He's a Boken Jedi, one that was trained outside of the Order, and there aren't many of those. Luke was obviously one of them. Obviously, Ahsoka, well, no, that's not true. Ahsoka was trained during the days of the Jedi Order, but she continued her training afterwards. So Kanan, in some ways, you know, might be considered one, but he was also in the Jedi Order. So it's really anybody who was trained after. At least that's my interpretation. So they discuss, like, Balin talks about how, and this is good foreshadowing, that the planet they're on was the Great Witch Kingdom of the Dathomiri, and that something is calling to them. Something is stirring there. And it reminds me very much of what they said in the Aftermath books that wound up being nothing because the sequel trilogy is garbage. In the Aftermath books, in one of those books that came out during the time of the sequel trilogy, the Emperor said that Jakku has like an ancient secret that was once important and will be again. Of course, we never even got what that secret was because I mentioned the sequel trilogy had a bunch of build-up in the books that went nowhere because Lucasfilm can't keep track of their own shit. But it's almost implied there's something there, maybe a deeper force entity. He even talks about how the Great Mothers might be afraid of it. There could actually be a much more dangerous enemy here that's being teased, not for the sequel trilogy because that already happened, but for down the road. This could all be building up to either Filoni's movie before episode 7, or maybe they're building up the possible arrival of a new villain for episodes 10, 11, and 12 beyond episode 9. We'll talk more about that. I'm sure Mike and I will talk about that in our video we're going to do about this episode, so make sure you watch that video when it drops. So there's a situation with these, I guess you can call them Tusken Raiders of that galaxy and Balin, but he doesn't want to fight them. So we actually see Ezra. She finds Ezra. He's got a beard. This was a great moment. Ezra reunites with Sabine here in episode 6 of Ahsoka. So another Jedi. Okay, let me go back to... So Thrawn is on the ship, and they figure out that another Jedi is following them, and he knows it's Ahsoka. And Thrawn basically tells them, he orders the destruction of Ahsoka. If they see a space whale, destroy it immediately. But before the episode ends, Thrawn asks the Night Sisters, or the Great Mothers, to borrow their dark magic. So who knows what he's gonna do? He's gonna try and do something with Ahsoka. He recognizes that Ahsoka's dangerous, but the real danger would be if we have Ahsoka, Ezra, and Sabine. We've got 2 Jedi and then 1 Jedi trainee all working together. And don't forget, we got Chopper and Hera. They're on the other side they're in the other galaxy still, the main one. But who's to say they won't eventually appear in the finale? We got 2 episodes left, man. But man, the lore building, the storytelling, this is what Star Wars should have been from the very beginning. And instead, like George Lucas said, they did a retro movie, which I said this before, y'all. I enjoyed Force Awakens and I enjoyed speculating, but what The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker did with that speculation was like a spit in the face to many, many Star Wars fans. This right here seems like it's going to actually have a payoff and introduce something new, whether it be the Yuzang Vong, more of these dark witches, something new, a different kind of threat, and I am on board for it. This is without question the best Disney Plus Star Wars show we've seen yet. Maybe the best sequel trilogy. Well, let me rephrase that. Maybe the best Star Wars stuff we've seen since the purchase. This or Mandalorian Season 2. It's a toss-up. I cannot wait till next week. Really good stuff here. What'd you think about the episode? Let me know down below. And, man, it just keeps getting better and better. I'm hyped.